Hello, everybody. You can see our task force has the mission of accelerate adoption of productivity enhancing products, tools, and systems. I think the key here is accelerate adoption. It's that adoption aspect that is typically challenging in our industry for a number of reasons. You guys have talked about today. A lot of the themes have to do with coordination, collaboration, communication, but also risk. And I think that one of the things that we've looked at is how can we look for the opportunities where there is early adoption, where there are innovation that's happening and being tried out, and also look for the areas where it's not being adopted. New products, new tools, new systems are not being adopted, and what's the reason for it, so we can get past those barriers to adoption. This is our team, our task force. Got some lovely mug shots up there, all in different areas of the industry, and whether it's from a contractor standpoint, a material supplier standpoint, looking to kind of collaborate and identify how do we bite off a piece of the elephant that is the industry's challenges with adoption of new technologies, new products, new solutions, new systems. So one of the things that we did, what did we do this year? There were challenges with us even just getting together as a group. So you talk about collaboration and coordination and timing. You can imagine just from a standpoint of project teams, how difficult it is for everyone to set aside time or dedicate time to address some sort of subject and get to a certain objective. Well, one of the things we decided to do is, can we identify some key categories that we can dive deeper into and address? So we first brainstormed a lot of different categories, and then we basically scored or voted and came up with these three that you see up on the screen. Automation and digital construction, which is really around the actual equipment or technologies that we could lean into that can help with not only efficiency, but also precision. We looked at some examples of that would be 3D printing, robotics, AI, Internet of Things, faster, safer, more precise builds. So this is really how do we look at technology? How do we try technology in a safe way? A lot of times I think where our industry gets caught up is, well, if we try something new, it's going to be inefficient at first. There's going to be a learning curve. And who's going to pay for that learning curve? Or how are we going to invest in that time in order to understand new technologies that maybe in theory can provide efficiency, but then the reality is really where we need the proof so that we can come up with some of those specific results that can be shared amongst the industry for more adoption. Model to field automation using QR codes and digital twins. Really, this is probably back to the main theme that people have been talking about is coordination. How do we get everybody on the project team looking at the same source of truth and the accurate source of truth when it comes to documents, when it comes to information, when it comes to execution and instructions? And so one of the things that we are looking at is different ways that information could be provided. And there's a number of people have referenced BIM models and different ways where you can have multiple dimensions of information in the same location and make it easier for project teams to coordinate and collaborate. I think this is probably one of the big downfalls of design bid build is the silos that it creates, different incentives for each of the different stakeholders, whereas if we get more integrated and we're looking at the same type of information, same truth of information, and we're all incentivized to execute on that information, that integrated model, I think, is where the industry needs to go. Material categories, it's kind of a big one when we talk about products and systems and solutions. So we looked at a few categories that we thought would be most pertinent: ready mix, aggregates, admixtures, rebar, formwork, lumber, and then ways within that to reduce waste in general. So the more efficient that we can be, the less waste that we can provide, the more sustainable our industry can be, less carbon use, things like that. So we tackle kind of first automation and digital construction. And as we look at different solutions that are out there, you could take robotics as an example and AI as an example. There are contractors out there that are pushing the envelope. They're trying new things. Whether it's robotics to line out tilt-up panels, or whether it's robotics that are coming down and that we see probably on the internet, depending on what you're watching, as far as actually replacing labor or replacing key aspects of the work that's being done. So when we look at adoption, and specifically are focused in the adoption side of things, how do we, as an industry, help with the testing, the validation, the safety, the risk reduction that can come from different technologies when it's new and it's not something that everybody understands yet? You know, when you have a conversation around AI, everybody has a different understanding of what that term means, that category means, and you really dive into it. There's not only are you looking at just, hey, can we ask AI to answer our questions or build some sort of framework or crunch some numbers? It's really about how can we leverage the technology that could be learning and creating more precision and more speed and efficiency within our systems. So those learning objectives that we outlined, we want to stay focused on this specifically for each category. So we want to identify key barriers that hamper concrete construction productivity, explore tools that unleash innovation in concrete design and construction, outline steps to embrace productivity, enhancing products, tools, and systems, and access and apply resources to improve concrete construction productivity during the design phase. A lot of people today have talked about getting people involved earlier in the process, and I think that we agree that that's key when it comes to the adoption, especially of new technologies. How do we try it out in a safe environment, sandbox environment, in order for us to validate the value? Our second one, model to field automation using QR codes and digital twins. So our learning objectives there were explore tools that unleash innovation in concrete design and construction, and analyze how contracts can create risk-averse project stakeholder silos and propose solutions to mitigate these effects. Outline steps that embrace productivity enhancing tools, products, tools, and systems. So today, I do think there's been a lot of overlaps, as we've been talking, a lot of themes that have come up when it comes to moving the industry along. And the project delivery aspects that have been brought up, I think, are pretty important because you see, especially I'm sure from the owner's representative side of things, that when you have an integrated team that can make decisions quicker and can collaborate faster, then there's more efficiency within the projects versus having to bring new people in and kind of have that learning curve of a new project team that's having to work together for the first time with new systems and new communication styles. I have a story for this, which is really just around something that our company has done over the last few years. We are a family-owned company, so we are moving from disconnected systems to an ERP system that connects, and that project was incredibly underestimated on how difficult just even an in-house small company trying to incorporate and integrate their systems to talk to each other really is. And we're in the middle of this kind of, how do we get our sales information to talk to our supply information, production information, and forecasting in a way that makes it easier for us to deliver for our customers and have product in the right place at the right time. So you take that just microcosm of a small company trying to create that integration in order to accomplish something that everybody in our company is focused on, is excited about, and wants to have happen, and you take that outside to a project team that potentially, depending on the contract delivery, might have dissimilar incentives on how to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. So some of these, the integration component, the communication, the collaboration as it relates to shared systems, shared information, we've identified as being things that are very key. And we specifically were talking about how can we get project information and what platforms are there out there and systems that could help with with streamlining some of those challenges. Lastly, material categories. So our learning objectives here were identify key barriers that hamper concrete construction productivity, evaluate strategies for improving construction documents to support productive project execution, and explore tools that unleash innovation in concrete design and construction. Again, one of the things that we have identified here is there are definitely obstacles and barriers to adoption when it comes to new products, materials. And it's not just about the fear that comes from something that's new. It's also the fear of the learning curve, like I discussed earlier. I recently talked with my mom, who's 78 years old, and was like, "Hey, Mom, I think AI could help you with some of your organization on your weekly basis and some of your menu coordination, and you could do some of these kind of quick things that you wouldn't necessarily need to spend time on." And she looked back at me, and she's a lifelong learner, and she said, "Yeah, I think I'm too old for AI." And I was like, "Wow, I've never heard that from a lifelong learner, a teacher for 30 years, having this mindset based on age or based on kind of stuck in their ways, or based on that they wouldn't look at something new that could help, even just to innovate." And so she and I had a fun conversation about that, and she's now trying things out. And I think that our industry gets caught up in what we're used to doing, what we're comfortable with. And so when we start looking at new technologies, especially on the materials side, how can we test these things in a sandbox? How can we promote or incentivize contractors, designers, owners to try new things in a safe manner, or in a small lab space or controlled area, so that we can get the validation that would allow it to become more mass adopted. Another story, last week I was in Cleveland at the International Residential Code public committees and public comment session. And all we were doing was trying to support the use of a standard that's been around for almost 30 years around a product. Just as a minimum, just at least test and work to the standard so that there's consistency. And that has been an ongoing, probably decade worth of trying to get just a minimum added to a code that would allow for builders to look at things a little bit differently from a minimum, a level playing field. Hey, we're all starting at the same place. We all have the same minimum. That was shot down in a close vote, but it was all really around first cost. It wasn't, even though this standard was really about longevity and about the operational efficiency or the long-term health of the building. And I think when we start talking about some of the barriers to entry, it's not just within our community, it's also those groups that are outside of this specific room that are also have a little bit of a slow path to adoption, a slow path to change because of the risk that's involved for either their constituents or the members within their group. And so I agree with a lot of the conversation around the incentive side of things, because I think that there's really an opportunity there. And when we talk about materials and change and testing new things out, how are we incentivizing our industry in order to reward people who are moving the dial? Because first movers don't always necessarily get the return on investment the same way that the next person who sees it and goes, okay, we can do that, but maybe not trip over ourselves like the first person did. Let's improve, and we can move forward. That's our task force. And any questions or discussion?